The government and opposition have been road testing their lines ahead of the formal election campaign, but very much looks like campaigning is underway already. Here's a little of the Prime Minister and the Shadow Treasurer this week.
Australia's economic recovery has to be secured by people who have a track record in economic management. Otherwise, you're going to see petrol prices go up, you're going to see electricity prices go up, you're going to see interest rates go up more than they would need to otherwise.
Petrol prices have skyrocketed on his watch. Is he now seriously claiming that he has a policy to keep petrol prices down? Well, then let's hear it. Is he seriously claiming that interest rates will not rise if he is re-elected? Well, let's hear about how he intends to do that and how he intends to promise that. The liar from the Shire is at it once again.
Joining me now is Parnell Palm McGuinness. She's former editor of the Liberal Party's website, now managing director at strategic comms firm Agenda C, and Darren Barnett, former press secretary to Prime Minister Gillard and now at the McKell Institute. Darren and Parnell, great to see you both. Let's put up this polling today. One number that jumped out at me, and this is this trustworthiness. Look at this, Darren. First to you, Julia Gillard back in 2012. You'll remember this, fell 17 points from August 2010 to 2012 during the height of the ferocious anti-carbon tax campaign. Look at that for Scott Morrison from April to November 2021, 15-point drop. He's now below where Julia Gillard was in that trustworthiness comparison back in 2012. What do you make of that, Darren?
Well, we're not quite into the election campaign, but certainly that number is worrying for the Prime Minister. I think the international stage and Emmanuel Macron, that played out really poorly domestically for the Prime Minister, and it's no surprise really that once he's come home, he's hit the ground basically on the hustings, and he's trying to shift back to domestic issues and trying to shift towards hip pocket issues as we head into the election campaign proper. Now, probably on 2PP, Labor has its nose in front, but that doesn't mean that Labor, certainly in my view, I don't think Scott Morrison is the underdog necessarily, that leaders have been returned across Australia throughout the pandemic due to the types of decisions and measures that they've taken. And for that reason alone, I think Mr Morrison probably starts with his nose in front. But it's going to be an interesting campaign. What was said today by Labor, it's a very strange choice by the Prime Minister to peg his fortunes on interest rates and petrol prices because, frankly, they are largely out of his control. So it will be a very interesting period into Christmas, and if we all get we read the tea leaves correctly, the election will probably be sometime, probably May. I don't think it'll be much before then.
No, I think you're right. There's a budget looming, Parnell. We know that, and that means a budget in April, and that provides the government with a platform to make that economic argument. And even if you've got a leader that's lost a bit of bark here and there, as I mentioned to Darren, it does enable the Treasurer to step up and play a greater role.
It does, and I think Frydenberg currently has probably a higher trust rating than Morrison does, partly because the Labor line about Morrison being a liar has stuck to him, and that's what he took from Macron. So Labor played that very well in terms of hammering home the idea that the Prime Minister is lying, and he has been out there trying to counter that. But whereas I think that Australians wouldn't really have had any problem with the Prime Minister taking on the French over submarines, the lying tag has been something that he's struggled with for a while. So that's something he's got to beat, and it will help to have Frydenberg out front and centre arguing on the economy close to the election so that it's not a one-man band again like it was in the 2019 election.
And for Labor, Darren, the difference, one of the many differences, because no election is the same as we know, but this has enabled the Prime Minister to serve for 4 years, and anyone in any job is obviously going to, you get a few cuts and bruises along the way, particularly in such a high-profile job. Does that give Labor more to work with, basically?
I think it's probably a better proposition to go to an election against Scott Morrison after 4 years than it was after 1 year that people do know a little bit more. And look, all governments and all leaders, the longer they are there, every decision or major decision that they make creates winners and losers. They all bend the truth to their advantage as often as they need to. Over time, that starts to gather its own momentum. It's not something peculiar to Scott Morrison. It's something that happens to most leaders. And Labor, obviously, I think would be they feel they're in a better position in terms of matching up on Mr Morrison than they did 3 or 4 years ago, despite the fact the polls were probably stronger in 2019. So the other thing I think it's worth mentioning that Jim Chalmers was out today. That line, obviously, they've road tested the liar from the Shire. Now, I reckon we're going to hear that a few more times before the election. And it's interesting that the Treasurer or the Shadow Treasurer was the one out there throwing stones today. It may well be that they keep the leader, Mr Albanese, relatively pure and have someone else out there throwing punches. And that's probably a better
Well, if you remember the last the election, the lines that you remember, the bill you can't afford is the one that I remember from the last election, and I think that was the one that really cut through. I just wonder, what is the line? Is it the one you refer to, Darren? We don't know, but we'll wait and see how the months unfold. Parnell, another element of what the Prime Minister's doing with the can-do capitalism and that sort of line that he's running this week, he's trying to also say, that message, governments have been telling you what to do. It includes the federal government, but he's clearly trying to say to those angry at the states, look, we're about reopening now. We're moving on.
Right, and this is him, I think, trying to win back the right. There has been a drift in the Conservative side of politics off to parties which have rightly complained about some of the oppressive policies and the length of the oppressive policies during the lockdown. So I think that what they're picking up on is a sense that people are sick of being told what to do, especially in the base. So they have to win that base back as well as win the centre. So the Prime Minister is sort of doing a bit of a splits here across from Wentworth to Liverpool, let's say, trying to bring together these very different concepts of where people want to go. For Wentworth, it's about the climate and ensuring that there is action. And in the more conservative electorates, it's about feeling like they've been done over a bit during the pandemic, which, of course, was great for desk jockeys like us and not so great for people who had to keep on working and were at the same time told all of the things that they could not do in their free time. So I think that he's workshopping a way through. Where I think he's missing a trick here is that he needs to describe a vision, and he doesn't have one of those yet. He rightly can be accused of not having made any big reforms during the opportunity of the pandemic. And I suspect that that's going to come home to roost, and that will also be one of the lines that Labor starts bringing out much closer to the election, that there is a vision that they have forward-looking for Australia, and what's the Prime Minister's?